G'day, Glenn Morris here from the Smart Energy Lab. Today I want to take you on a bit of a tour. This is going to be a longish video. I want to show you around a working microgrid. It's the one that I live on, that I've built, and that I run training courses on the design of microgrid systems. So let's start at the beginning. A microgrid basically is a miniature version of what the utility grid actually is already. You have a grid forming system, so in this case it's these inverters. So we've got 30 kilowatts of three-phase inverters here, and because it's a solar battery system, there's the batteries. I'll show you the solar in a little bit, and that's part of the magic of a microgrid, how you configure the solar. But there's a lot of things connected. So let's go on a bit of a tour, and I'll show you where all these things are. So let's get going. Now, there's nothing very special about having solar panels out in a paddock, whether it's an on-grid system in a rural area probably, or an off-grid system. But with a microgrid, the advantage is that you can have generation in lots of different ways connected to your main grid forming system. So what we've got here is a ground mount system. There's 8 kilowatts of TW solar panels here on a ground mount system, and it's actually facing somewhat northwest. Now, for optimum performance in the southern hemisphere, you would really want to be a north-facing array, but because of some local shading to the east, it doesn't actually make a whole lot of sense. But also, we're trying to spread the generation out over a longer period of the day. So having some east-facing, some north-facing and some west-facing arrays really helps spread the generation profile. Rather than get a great big spike in the middle of the day, have a long, low, flat production curve. Now, this system here is AC coupled. AC coupling means that the energy from the solar, which is basically DC electricity, is being converted to AC power by a solar inverter. So the solar inverter here is a Sol Planet 8 kilowatt three-phase inverter. So this inverter converts it to AC power and transmits it basically over standard AC cables back to the switchboards to which the microgrid is forming. Now, the advantage of using three-phase is that there are less losses when you start to have longer cable runs. So that's one of the big pluses of running three-phase, and it's why just about every street in Australia will have three-phase running down the middle of the street. Maybe your house only takes one of them, but it's much better for relatively short distance transmission. We're talking, you know, less than a kilometre or so. So anyway, it's three-phase. Since we have this location out here, it's actually a car park. So there's our little car park behind here. And because people park here and a lot of people are starting to move to EVs, we have an EV charging point. So this is a Wallbox copper SB, a BYO charger. BYO meaning bring your own cable. It should be BYOC, but anyway, bring your own cable. Which is pretty common in public areas because cables are expensive. You don't want them to be accidentally damaged by being left out and people driving over them. So this is a BYOC for cable charging point connected to the microgrid. Now, it's not directly powered by the solar panels behind me, but it is part of the network of systems connected to the microgrid. Anyway, let me show you a bit more of the solar. Wow, this is big. This is our solar tracking system. It consists of a 1P and a 2P tracker. For those who are not familiar with the terminology, 1P means one panel in portrait, which is the ones at the rear, and 2P means two panels in portrait. It takes up less land, a 2P, but it's a much bigger structure, so it has more infrastructure to support it. So these were provided by Arctech Solar as a demonstration and training site for people installing solar farms. Not what you would typically find on a small residential or even large residential installation, because tracking solar really makes sense when you're doing megawatts, not kilowatts. But anyway, we've got here 68 kilowatts of tracking solar. Now, what's the benefit of tracking? You might see how steep the angle is this morning. It's only like before, it's around about 8 o'clock in the morning here in Melbourne in summertime, and the sun is actually risen, but we can't see it because of the fog. But the sun will be shining directly onto these panels, and being perpendicular to the panel gives the best performance for a solar panel. So these effectively, as they go track from facing east to horizontal at the middle of the day to facing west in the afternoon, are giving their maximum performance for most of the day. It's not just a big bump in the middle of the day as the sun hits them on the north face. These are actually producing more or less full power all day long when there's direct sunlight. The other advantage of these, and we'll see it as we go around the back, is these are a mixture of monofacial and bifacial panels. Now, what I mean by that, monofacial is your traditional panel that you put flat on a roof. It has a back sheet, typically a white back sheet, which is the insulator at the rear of the panels, and you can see them here. So these are the monofacial panels. By the way, these are LONGi 435 watt panels. They're all half-cut cells. They were installed about 3 years ago. So the monofacial panels work just fine. In fact, that's what you would normally stick on any roof that you have panels parallel. But now we come to these ones. Now, these aren't back to front. These are bifacial panels. So these dark ones here, the back of it has no back sheet, and they're actually designed to generate electricity on the front and the rear of the module. Now, what's the advantage there? Well, it's like having two modules actually, and particularly when you've got conditions like today, which is kind of foggy, the back of the panels are producing almost as much energy as the front of the panels. It's pretty impressive. But the main benefit is the reflected light. So on a sunny day, there's a lot of light reflected off the ground. Even grass reflects light. The lighter the color of the ground, the more reflection. Technically, it's called albedo, reflected light. So a bifacial module, if it's installed where the rear can gain access to reflected light, you'll get 10, 15, maybe even more, maybe 20% more production out of them. Now these, which on dark grass, actually don't get a huge amount. We're getting about 8% more production. But if you ever look at solar modules and they tell you the efficiency of a module, getting 8% more out of it is a huge jump. So it's really worth it. The way these things track, by the way, is you can probably see over my shoulder here a little orange motor. So it's called a slew drive. And it's surprisingly small. It's very heavy, it weighs over 100 kilos, but it's an 83 watt motor powered by the solar panels and powered by a tiny lithium battery at nighttime. Now, why does it need to do anything at nighttime? These are designed to be actively protected from high wind events. So if you're getting consistent high buffering, just to reduce the shock on the system, they'll tilt nose into the wind at about 15 degrees. And so that's known as stowing. Now it depends on the particular tracker. These trackers will stow at about 15 degrees from the horizontal, but some trackers will stow perfectly horizontal, different designs. But that means that they can survive high wind events. Now here in subalpine Victoria, we don't actually get cyclones, we do get high winds though. So these have been here for, like I said, 3 or 4 years, been through many a storm, and I rarely ever see them stow. So they can really sustain their production even in bad weather conditions. So this is connected to the microgrid by a very long DC cable. So we've got, in fact, there is 4 strings of cables. Each of the trackers is split into 2 subarrays, and those 4 strings over 250 meters of DC cable underground back to the Smart Energy Lab, which is where their inverters are. We'll have a look at those in a tick. Well, here I am in what we call the Hort area. It's actually a heavily fortified, well, from deer, wombats, lyrebirds, to some extent rabbits and people as well, area to grow food. There's a bit over a hectare here of very productive soil. In fact, the whole of the land here is really deep, loamy soil. It needs a little bit of minerals, but it's just great for growing stuff. Behind me actually is the farmers. So we sublease some of this to Timbara Farms, and they grow organic vegetables here at Murumuru Co-op, which is pretty awesome. And it's just amazing what they can grow here out of a relatively small area of land. We try to emulate some of their successes, but that's what professionals do really well. In this case, grow lots of vegetables in a small area and deliver it locally. So very small food miles involved. So why is I'm talking about food when I'm talking about a microgrid, basically? Because food is energy, and if you're thinking about sustainability and resilience, actually having some of your own food supply is a great idea. Now, I'm not saying you have to be a prepper, but it's just good for health. It's good for your own economics, because growing food is one of the cheapest ways of getting food. It's also a recreational activity. And so here at Murumuru Co-op, a lot of people come here just to gather together and do a bit of gardening. So it's kind of like a social activity as well. What do we grow here? Well, being it's about 700 metres altitude in the Yarra Valley near Melbourne, a lot of the colder climate plants suit here, so brassicas for instance, but you know, in summertime we can bust out and grow a wide range of vegetables and legumes. We also have a lot of nut and fruit trees here as well, so yeah, pretty plentiful in terms of food options. If you're wondering what all these car tyres behind me are, this is kind of a no-dig approach to reducing the grass that grows inevitably when you leave a paddock fallow for a while. We cover it up, and it's called solarizing. So the heat of the sun causes the grass with lack of light to brown off and die, and the tyres are there to stop it blowing away basically, so they get reused, they don't get disposed of. It's a bit of a communal job unwrapping those tarps, because they're huge. They're like 20 metres by 20 metres, and often as you unwrap them there's sometimes a fair few snakes underneath there as well. We do have the usual deadly species here in Australia, but no one's ever been bitten, so it's just be mindful where there are snakes. When you're walking along grass, watch where you go. When you're lifting up sheets of iron and plastic that have been lying on the ground for a while, maybe use a stick and stand back a bit. So there you go. And behind me is a project started by a couple of the people who are living here, Insan and John. They've done an amazing job of restoring what was basically grass to a very productive area of vegetables. So this is not part of Timbara Farms, this is our co-op's little food harvesting area. So yeah, really cool. Anyway, let's get on the tour. So behind me here is our still part of the horticultural area behind the big defensive chain mesh fence, but there's a small vineyard here. Now this was started by our recently deceased early member, Hardy Broso. He was a big fan of grapes, first drinking them, then growing them, then making wine. So this is Hardy's little grape vineyard, which is now managed by another member. So thank you, Holger, for taking over Hardy's legacy. We've also got blueberries. Now, blueberries are delicious, and the birds agree. So it has to be fully netted just to try and get a good crop without them feeding all the local bird life, which, you know, to be fair, they get plenty of others, because we grow other berries which aren't caged up, and so they get to eat our, our raspberries and other fruits. In fact, quite a lot of native birds like the nut trees we have here, so walnuts, hazelnuts, etc. They're pretty popular with the wildlife and some of the human life as well. So I'm just walking past the hort area, and there's the raspberry canes not being maintained at the moment. Most people have home raspberry gardens here. So let's check out some more of the power systems. Many of the power systems here on the Wombat Hollow microgrid are actually provided by companies who want their students to be trained on their products. And so I've had a lot of products come here and they get used. So this system in here, in what's really a very dark little bit of a shed, don't know if you can even see much, is a old lead acid. Now when I say old lead acid, the batteries are probably about 6 years old. They're Trojan batteries, kindly provided for my students to train on. And in the cabinet there is a Victron MultiPlus 1. It's an earlier MultiPlus. The MultiPlus 2 is out now. And it's a 3 kilowatt inverter, which provides power to what we call a loose box. So this is basically an animal shelter, but also it provides power to a very small house via underground AC cables. So it's also connected to the microgrid. So any deficit in the battery system here can be topped up with the microgrid, and any surplus can be exported to it. So let's check out another system. I'm now in the centre of a cluster of houses known as Wombat Hollow. Now, Wombat Hollow is where I live. I've lived here for over 23 years. Well, actually, I've lived in a few spots on the co-op, but Wombat Hollow for most of it. And there's actually 7 homes in this cluster, and these 7 homes are all connected to the microgrid. They all have their own solar and battery systems, so they're actually independent, standalone systems, but instead of having a backup generator, they use the microgrid system as their backup, also for sharing surplus. So I'm standing in what looks like Woodhenge. It's actually, we're building a little community gathering area here for our cluster. And behind me here is one of the houses. This is Chelsea and Ollie's house where they raised their 3 kids. It's technically known as a nanagon, 9-sided house. There's a challenge to build. And there's Ollie's shed behind me as well. There's a fire bunker. So this fire bunker is really pretty important since Black Saturday, where unfortunately a lot of people died from being exposed to fire in unprotected houses. It became pretty popular and recommended to have some form of shelter. And so this is a regulation fire shelter with double doors, fireproof doors, made of concrete, partially buried in the ground, away from trees. And it's for our cluster, the final refuge if you cannot defend your home. There's another house here. So this is Bindy's house, where Shani and Amy also live at the moment. And it's connected to the microgrid. In fact, it's got the most solar panels of any house at Brno, partly because we've used it for a lot of projects. I think there's about 15 kilowatts of solar on this house, but most of it actually is connected to the microgrid to systems in my lab. Now, this might seem a bit odd that my neighbours' houses host panels that aren't even connected to their home, because we're on a single title here. We don't distribute power across property boundaries because we're on only one property. We're a cooperative. We cooperatively own the whole property together. And that actually makes microgrid easier, because unless you own the whole property, depending on your state regulations, so here in Victoria, you'd have to get a special exemption to be able to distribute power across a property boundary. It's a safety issue, basically. So here it's not a problem, and it's actually a virtue. So we can very easily reticulate between houses and build a microgrid. So let's check out some more houses. So behind me is my house. Actually, I built this about 12 or 13 years ago, and it's a straw bale house. Now, no jokes about the 3 little pigs, please. A straw bale is actually excellent for our climate. Our climate is predominantly cool temperate. We even get a bit of snow in the wintertime. Not enough to get excited about, but it's certainly that cold. And the diurnal temperature between day and night is actually quite small in wintertime. So it might be 5 degrees or 0 degrees in the morning and 5 degrees in the middle of the day. So when you've got a small temperature range and it's below comfort temperatures, you want a super insulated home. So this is a super insulated home, straw bale construction, double glazed windows, expanded foam in all the cavities, including ceiling spaces, an insulated slab. It's got what's called waffle pods, basically large polystyrene blocks underneath the slab to insulate it from the soil. Perimeter insulation, so the edge of the slab is insulated well, so it won't transfer heat or coolth in and out of the building. And it's hydronically heated, so there's pipes in all the slabs and radiators upstairs. And we have a wood-fired boiler, and it's also, we have solar PV water heating as well. So that's my house in a nutshell, but you might see on top of it is quite a lot of solar panels. Now, there's a couple of benefits to covering your roof with solar panels. I mean, the obvious one is generating lots of free solar energy, but the other is certainly in summertime, it's shading your roof. Now, the benefits of just that passive shading is quite significant. I've been told by some who've measured it, it's around about 5 degrees drop in temperature by just having a panel with a gap above your, particularly if you've got a tin or tile roof. So that's another benefit. It reduces the thermal load on the building itself. Now this house, of course, is connected to the Smart Energy Labs microgrid, and also a lot of the panels on the roof here are directly connected underground via DC to systems that we're testing. So once again, I'm using some of the houses here as hosts for test systems. There's about 10 kilowatts of solar on this house. Now I've also used some second-hand panels, some basically panels that would have gone to, well, once upon a time landfill, but no longer because it's e-waste, but they would have probably been a bit of a bother to get rid of. I've used them actually as a shading device for the western side of the house. Now, like I said, there's lots of benefits to solar, and look at this. So these are some old 60-watt Canica panels. They actually still work, and they actually are connected to one of the systems here, so they had a second life. They're not very big, at 60 watts, 10 of them, it's only 600 watts, but what they are is a very durable building material. Now, they're made of glass and aluminium, they'll never need painting, they'll probably outlast me, and they shade the western side of the house. They did actually replace what I did have as previously was a shade sail, which kept on blowing away and deteriorating in the sunlight. So there you go. Think of solar panels have many lives. They can generate energy, they can cool your house, they can look great, they can be used as building materials. Carports are another one. In fact, if I turn around, you'll see we've actually got a solar carport behind me. Now, it's got 10 kilowatts of LONGi panels on top of that. It's connected to the microgrid as well. Now, you might see a little bit of a pattern here. Basically, every roof I can find, we put solar panels on. Even in this case, the south side of my neighbour's house. Now, don't rule out in the southern hemisphere, south is considered a poor orientation, but an empty roof is a poorer orientation for solar. So we've got panels on the north, we've got panels tilted up, it's quite a steep angle as well, and we've got panels facing south. And believe it or not, in summertime, south-facing panels work really quite well because the sun rises at our latitude in Victoria in the southeast, which is behind the north-facing panels. And so it's getting morning sun when the north-facing panels aren't even getting it. So they work better at the beginning of the summer's day and also likewise at the end of a summer's day. So south-facing panels, I like to call them the new north because they're empty. The roof's empty. So let's check out the inverters for the microgrid system. So behind me is the inverters, or the solar inverters, for the solar farm. We jokingly call it a solar farm. The tracking system, the 68 kilowatts of tracking solar, comes in with 4 strings to 4 20 kilowatt 3-phase solar inverters. Now these are Select Sun inverters. They're sold, or actually these ones were provided by Selectronic as part of the testing system here, and they're very, very useful to us. One of the big uses in terms of a microgrid, apart from generating lots of solar power, is that they can be controlled by comms. That means they can be very precisely controlled in terms of their power production. Why is that important? So here's the first challenge of the microgrid is, what do you do with surplus solar? You can't export it to the grid. It's a use it or lose it kind of equation. And one of the problems with a microgrid that's islanded from the grid is that you have to be able to control that solar very accurately, particularly when the battery system on the microgrid is full. You can't send the power anywhere else. so you've got to curtail the production. Now, there's a couple of ways we do that. We have a frequency shift power control system, part of the Selectronic software, which is actually built into every inverter that has 4777 Part 2 compliance. That's the Australian New Zealand standard for inverter systems connected to a utility grid. They all have by default a frequency power response mode. That means as the frequency goes up on the microgrid, their power goes down. But it's, you know, kind of useful, but it's not fast enough when you've got big power to manage. And so using these comms controlled, I believe it's a Modbus control system, they can tell the inverters in millisecond timing how much power to produce. So they can ramp them down really quickly. Now that's important when you've got cloud edge effects. So you've had maybe a thunderstorm and it's gone from being pitch black to the clouds part and you've got full sun and the panels are cold, which actually is when you get the most production out of a solar panel. And that sudden spike in power needs to be managed by the grid forming system. And so the Selectronic SP Pro, the manager, will raise the frequency and try and shed as much of the unmanaged solar generation as possible, but it will control the managed solar generation, so these are managed by comms, very quickly and ramp them down. So we've got about 50% managed, 50% unmanaged, and between the two, it works really well. Okay, well, let's look at some more systems here. Okay, we're in one of the many training rooms and testing facilities here at the Smart Energy Lab. They're all named by number. This is T2, being the second training area, because a lot of these were built by my students when I used to have courses run here at the lab. But these days, basically, I'm just doing product assessment, bit of field testing, and making content for you guys. So this is one of these spaces. Now there's an awful lot of systems in here which I will explain in detail later on, but you know, there's things like from Fox ESS, they're all in one. Over here we've got very interesting sodium ion battery from Nation Energy. That's sodium, not lithium. Pretty cool, eh? I've got a Fox ESS Energy Cube system here. I've got a Swatton grid tie inverter, a Solinteg grid tie inverter, a Sigenergy 15 kilowatt 3-phase hybrid inverter, a LG Chem, and yes, this is a new one because the good people at LG replaced the old one because it was under recall. So this is their high voltage battery, 10 kilowatt hour. And I've got a SolarEdge system here. This is the 10 kilowatt 3-phase G4, the Gen 4, with triple power batteries. And these are the second generation triple power batteries. That's like 25 kilowatt hours of batteries there, connected in series at 100 volts each. So it's a 400 volt series string of batteries. And on this side, I've got the well-known Fronius Gen 24, and a very popular inverter in Australia. In fact, Fronius is a very popular brand in Australia because of their quality, service, and features. And it's connected to a BYD HVM battery, so a high voltage battery. That means each of those battery modules, you can go up to about this high, can give you up to 22 kilowatt hours of storage in one stack. We've got an AERL NPPT here. Now this is an Australian company, Australian Energy Research Labs. They're actually the inventors of the maximum power point tracker. Believe it or not, it's an Australian invention. Pretty amazing, eh? And down below here, these curious silver boxes, they're actually wrapped up in bubble wrap to keep them warm, some Redflow batteries. So these are Redflow 10 kilowatt hour flow batteries, two of them. Now currently the system's off. We have a little fault in one of these Victron inverters, but that's not a problem because Victron are excellent at support. So when it's time to get one of these fixed, you just get an RMA and identify what the problem is and send it off to them. So we're just going to get one of these repaired. So it's a 3-phase Victron system, and we've also got a SIMO 3-phase Fronius Snap solar inverter here connected to this system with the Redflow batteries. Now let me take you into one of the other labs. Warning, it's a little bit of a mess and We often have projects here, and sometimes we haven't finished tidying up. So this is actually an old boat shed. So funnily enough, it's called the boat shed, and it's been the site of many a system installation. So things like Sonnen behind me. There's Stecker with their modular small inverters. There's a Pylontech battery cabinet with Pylontech's latest US 5000 batteries. Well, it's a bit noisy. So US 5000, so they're actually 5 kilowatt hour battery modules. There's 3 of them in here. So that's 15 kilowatt hours in this cabinet. We could probably fit a 4th one in there if we wanted to. That's pretty nice, and it's a weatherproof cabinet. Lux Power. Don't know a lot about Lux Power, but this was turned up, and we're testing it with Dynes batteries. Huawei. Now, this has been on the wall for like 5 years. This was the early hybrid inverter, the M0, since being replaced by the M1. Really excellent product, but not so available in Australia at the moment. We have a SolarEdge system. In fact, we've got quite a lot of SolarEdge systems here. This is one of their older ones, the SE5000 with the backup unit attached, and it takes a high voltage battery. Down here we've got Selectronic again. There's a lot of Selectronic inverters here. I mean, they're made in Melbourne. They're a wonderful company, and they make awesome off-grid and hybrid inverters. So in the sense of hybrid, they can be connected to the grid, but they don't have a solar input. I should be careful about what I say. They're a battery inverter that you can AC couple solar to. LG Chem, this is a with new firmware, so it's now been updated, so it's considered the safe Resu 13, and I think they've downscaled it to 12 kilowatt hours. Pylontech again, but these are their high voltage batteries. So these are 50 volt batteries connected in series to give us a 200 volt stack, and it's connected to a Spanish inverter from a company called Energie. Now, Energie's, I don't think really much presence in the residential market anymore in Australia. They're more in the utility market with their central inverters for solar farms. But must admit, I really like these inverters. So this will take 15 kilowatts of solar. It can charge the batteries at 6 kilowatts. At the same time, it can invert at 6 kilowatts. So it's a pretty powerful unit. It packs a lot of punch. And I've got a couple of them here. In fact, we had, I think, 5 or 6 of them here at one point. Over here is the GoodWe corner. Lovely GoodWe. GoodWe make a huge range of solar inverters and batteries and other equipment, even microinverters, and now some lightweight panels as well. So this is the GoodWe 3-phase hybrid inverter. We haven't got a battery connected to it at the moment. And this is the single-phase 5 kilowatt hybrid inverter, and we do have a battery connected to it. In fact, we have these very nice Weco batteries. It's an Italian company, Weco, and these are being supplied by Valen in Sydney. So Weco, interesting in that these can be connected in parallel or series. That's pretty unusual for a lithium battery, normally the one or the other. So they've got 2 sets of terminals. They've got terminals for series connection and terminals for parallel connection. And there's if you got them in high voltage configuration like we do, there's a BMS box as well at the end. GE, not currently turned on at the moment, but this is a GE inverter which is made by GoodWe, and it's a solar inverter. And here is a nice big Huawei commercial scale inverter. Now, this is rated at 29.9 kilowatts, which I believe is a D-rated 50 kilowatt inverter. Why on earth would they D-rate it? Well, there's this kind of barrier in many states in Australia that once you go over 30 kVA, you fall into a category where you need extra protection of the grid. It's known as secondary protection or a grid protection unit. It adds $10,000 to $20,000 to the cost of an installation, but the customer gets no benefit at all. It's just to protect the network. And so systems go up to around 29.9 without secondary protection, and over that they generally do. So that's kind of a curious one. And as I mentioned, Sonnen. So this is a little training room here where we've got quite a lot of systems either active or have been active in recent times. Let's check out some more. Now, all good things must come to an end. No, it's not the end of the tour, but it's probably the end of all the wonderful clean energy chat that I've been having, because ultimately a backup generator is your final resort. And what we've got here is a 22 kVA 3-phase diesel generator from AERL. Now, why have we got a diesel generator when we've got all this solar and actually a very large microgrid battery system? It's because the weather. You cannot predict how long bad weather can last for, and unless you're prepared to be without power at all, you need some form of demand energy source. And that's when a generator finally comes to the rescue. So we use it virtually never during summer and a little bit in wintertime. In fact, to be honest, quite a bit in wintertime until probably next winter when we've upgraded the battery system, doubled the storage capacity on the microgrid. We've got about 2 or 3 days worth of autonomy on the microgrid. So if the weather sustains very, very poor weather after 3 days, we either cut back on our consumption or a diesel generator will kick in automatically and provide backup. Now, one of the considerations when choosing a generator is I would highly recommend that it's auto start. Now, it's not a big deal. Like even some of the quite cheap portable generators have auto start functionality, but it means that you're unlikely to run your battery system completely to its dead, because the auto start function will mean the generator will kick in and save the day. So really recommend auto start. From a reliability point of view, diesel is generally better than petrol. They last longer. In fact, they last a lot longer. Some people say that a quality diesel generator is like grandfather's axe. It's got 3 new heads and 4 new handles. They're highly maintainable. They are significantly more expensive though, but then again, the total cost of ownership over the lifetime of the system is what you need to consider. You can run them on biofuels too. So if you've got access to biodiesel, you could use biodiesel, which would be a more sustainable fuel source. They are noisy. You can have sound covers, but they're not soundproof. They're just sound reducing. So you probably want to think about where you're going to locate them, particularly if they're going to be running at night time and they can be a bit disturbing to neighbours, etc. So providing a location where they can be somewhat sound absorbed is a good idea. Fuel storage is another one. There's actually regulations around fuel storage in Australia, so depending on the volume of fuel that you're storing and what state or territory you're in, you need to comply with that. But most generators will have their own onboard fuel storage, but it's your responsibility to maintain that. So you might think you've got a backup system, but it's only a backup if it's got fuel. And on top of that, if it's auto start, it only auto starts if the starter battery is charged up. So having a way of keeping a battery charged on a system like this, which may not be used for 6 months, means you need some other form of trickle charging for the starter battery. Now what we've got here is just a simple 12-volt battery charger connected to the batteries running off the microgrid, so it keeps the battery full. But another option is actually have a dedicated very small solar panel, just like a 5-watt solar panel with a voltage controller, and connect that to the starter battery so that you've always got a full battery. It also means you won't have to replace it so often because it's likely to be a lead acid battery and they hate being left flat. So there you go, the backup system that we prefer not to use, but it's nice to have. Let's check out some more. Okay, well, we've been talking a lot about generation and battery storage, but then it comes to loads. We have a range of loads. We've got houses, of course, with the usual appliances, but we've also got EV charging. Now, electric vehicles have come in a rush here to Murumuru Co-op, and at the Smart Energy Lab is where we charge them because we have quite a lot of surplus energy on a sunny day. We've got 8 EVSEs. Now, electric vehicle supply equipment is the fancy name for an AC outlet that charges your car. It's what you would normally see on the wall like this. The one behind me here is from Wallbox. This is their copper SB with a cable plugged in, and it basically is an AC source of power. They can be single or 3-phase. All the ones we've got here are connected in 3-phase because that's what we have, and that gives us the potential for the highest rate of charge for the cars that can support 3-phase charging, like Tesla, 11 kilowatts 3-phase, but if you connect it to single phase, it's only 7.4. So that's our charging system, but we have a problem. What happens when it's nighttime, there's not lots of surplus solar and it's winter and we don't want to use up our microgrid battery? So what we've got here is a standalone, well, it's not technically standalone, but it's a dedicated storage system. So these are Pylontech Force H1 batteries. We haven't finished building these. They'll have a couple more on top of each of those. And so that'll give us 40 kilowatt hours of stored energy. And above it is a Solinteg 20 kilowatt hybrid inverter, 3-phase. So it can actually charge cars at night time using these batteries. And the program will be such that when these batteries are empty, it will stop charging the car and not draw upon the microgrid. So once again, the microgrid gives you flexibility. You can share energy between different systems, whether it's surplus exported to the microgrid or deficit drawn from it. But you can also connect lots of other equipment, such as dedicated EV charging systems. Now, I mentioned the Wallbox SB. We've got a whole range of Wallboxes here, kindly provided by Wallbox themselves. We've got the Commander 2 here. Now, Commander 2 is more they're designed for more commercial installations, which gives you a lot of monitoring and control. It's got a nice touch screen, and all of the Wallbox chargers can be connected via Bluetooth, via Wi-Fi or wired Ethernet. And for the purposes of programming, Bluetooth makes it very easy to program them. You just need the app on your phone. But if you want them to connect to the Wallbox cloud, it's called mywallbox.com, then you need either Wi-Fi or wired Ethernet. So we've got a mixture of both here. So that's the Commander 2. We've also got their small residential unit, which is the Pulsar. Now, it's the Pulsar here. It's very cute, isn't it? But that's actually a 22 kilowatt EVSE. Size is not what it matters, it's the design of the system. Also, the ring around here changes color depending on whether it's charging, whether it's finished charging or waiting to charge. So this little unit is a great little home system. And currently, it's got the tethered option, so we've got a permanent connected Type 2 cable for it. We've got a few other charging options here. So from a company called Smappee, I believe from Belgium, they have a range of charging solutions, including their pillar system. So basically a freestanding pillar. Now this will be more typical of a car park system. Here it is here behind me. And it's also connected to the cloud. It's kind of cute. It's got this little house with legs on the bottom here, which is their motto, their symbol, and that changes color depending on white means it's available, green and pulsing means it's charging, red means it's not available. So we programmed this through the Smappee cloud so that it's only available between 9 AM in the morning and midnight. So you can charge during those hours and it will automatically stop supplying power to, in this case, it's got two Type 2 connectors. So you can plug in two cars here and charge them both at 22 kilowatts. Pretty cool, eh? So 8 EVSEs, but there's one secret weapon. Well, I was pretty excited when we got it, and let's check that one out. So EV charging, it's actually possible to fast charge on a microgrid. In fact, we've proven it. This is a 50 kilowatt DC charger from Delta. And thanks Delta for supplying this for testing and training here at the lab. It's got two connectors. One is a Type 2 CCS, which is the most common in Australia, and it's also got a CHAdeMO for cars like Nissan and Zoe, which use the Japanese style CHAdeMO connector. Now, we did have a little bit of a challenge up until recently, which is 50 kilowatts is a lot to run off basically a 30 kilowatt battery system, 30 kilowatts of stored or available battery power augmented by any surplus solar, because we could do 50 kilowatts when the sun's shining, but if it popped behind a cloud, our grid forming system would have to ramp up into overload, and it can do what you could call not so much overload but surge. It can surge up to nearly 60 kilowatts for quite a while, like 30 minutes, but it really pushes it, and we'd rather not do that. So we derated this because you can adjust their maximum power at put to 30 kilowatts. But now that we've increased our battery storage, we've doubled it from 80 to 160 kilowatt hours of storage, and it is summertime, I think we can bring this back up to full power. And at 50 kilowatts, you can charge many EVs from almost empty in an hour. Most people don't actually run their EVs down to empty. And if you've got an EV, you probably realize that charging slowly is actually better for your batteries. So this is really just a quick top up that when you need it. Mostly people will use the wall-mounted EVSEs to charge over a slow period, like overnight or over a matter of hours. Anyway, that's the Delta 50 kilowatt DC charger. Now, it's pretty big, by the way. It weighs 740 kilos, but Delta now make units which are a similar power rating, which are wall mounted. So the technology has moved on since this unit was built. So you should check out their 25 kilowatt and larger wall mount DC chargers. Amazing. Let's check out some more systems. Yep, another house on the microgrid. So this is my neighbours, Kevin and Beck, and their 2 kids live in this house. Now, this house has a modest sized PV system on it, on quite a steep pitched roof. It's kind of orientated really for north winter performance at that sort of steep angle. There's a few shading issues. As you can see, there are trees around, but they're all to the south. And there is some dormer windows and a chimney, which would provide a bit of shading on those panels at the beginning and end of the day. But this is once again where a microgrid comes to the rescue. They can draw on the microgrid when they need, but they can generate their own energy and store it in their own battery system. Now they have a SolarEdge single phase 6 kilowatt inverter with triple power batteries. They've got, I think, about 15 kilowatt hours of storage. So they're pretty self-sufficient, but they do have an electric car now, and they're going to be needing a bit more oomph. So we'll be running another cable down to their property to provide extra capacity for EV charging. So there's yet another house on the microgrid. Let's check another one out. Well, we're getting around the cluster. This is one of the last houses. So this is an early house here built at Murmura, probably over 30 years ago. It's a mud brick house built by Bob and Yolanda Rich. Some of you might actually know Bob Rich. He's quite a well-known writer in publications like Earth Garden, and that's his house. Now, he's not living there anymore. They've sort of semi-retired to the local town. This is actually for sale, so if you're looking to join Murmura Co-op, there are houses available. So this house has a 3 kilowatt PV array, and it's got a Redback all-in-one hybrid inverter system. Let's go and check it out. So this is a Redback 5 kilowatt hybrid system provided by Redback for the Smart Energy Lab. Now it's actually connected to a house on our microgrid. Now normally I wouldn't recommend conventional hybrid inverters for off-grid installations, but this is kind of a special case. A microgrid provides a grid, and in many ways this inverter works exactly like it would on the grid. When there is excessive demand, it can still use the microgrid to meet that high demand. So it can parallel with the microgrid and supply power, as well as have its own reserve, which it prioritizes. So most hybrid systems you can program for different use characteristics. The most popular one is what they call self-use, where it uses solar first, battery second, grid third. Now here, that would be solar first, battery second, microgrid third. And this house is currently empty, so all the power from this system, the batteries are full all the time, is exported to the microgrid. So that's another benefit, is that none of that solar energy really gets, well, some of it gets curtailed, but it doesn't get wasted. So this is quite a modest system. There's 10 kilowatt hours of storage here, but this house was designed to be very minimal in terms of its energy demand. 12 volt lighting, DC fridge, Actually, they used to have a gas fridge, but I think they have a conventional fridge now. But all the heating is via hydronics or wood-fired boiler and a wood-fired heater. There you go. All right, on to the next one. All right, we're nearly finishing the tour. I think this is the second to last house to look at. Now, this is a very modest little studio where Matt and Jess live. It was built just as a studio, so it's pretty basic. And it has no solar. Well, it's got one panel on the roof, which I'm not even sure if that's connected to anything. So how do they manage with energy? Guess what? The microgrid came here. So we basically reticulated cables down from the loose box, which you would have seen earlier. And the loose box actually is the primary energy source for this building. So this building, you can't really see it, but if behind me is the north, there are a lot of trees to the north on a slope. So in wintertime, this house actually is in shade all day long, and therefore it wouldn't be much benefit in putting solar panels on it. So what we've done is move the solar to a building nearby, the loose box, about 50 metres away, and run AC cables underground to this building here. So they do have their own solar and battery system, but it's not even located near the house. So there you go. Another benefit of a microgrid is being able to separate dwellings from where the energy is being generated and stored. Let's get on to our last house. Well, this is my second go at recording this one. I forgot to press record the first time and gave a great spiel, but here we go one more time with feeling, Glenn. So this is a tiny house, and tiny houses are very popular in Australia. In fact, in Victoria, you actually can build up to 60 square metre dwelling without planning permission. And that's kind of a big deal. A lot of people either can't afford or don't wish to have a 200 square metre McMansion, are quite happy with a compact dwelling. And that's where tiny houses come in. They're relocatable, basically. Now, this one's got solar on the roof here, but it's got some very interesting solar. It's got both conventional solar panels, photovoltaic panels, and photovoltaic thermal, or PVT for short. Now, photovoltaic thermal panels combine the benefit of generating electricity, but also making hot water. Now, on a very small dwelling like this, every square metre of roof space is valuable. And if you think about the conversion efficiency of a photovoltaic panel, it converts about 20% of the sun's energy to electricity, whereas a thermal system converts more like 60% of the sun's energy into heat, or heated water. So the two together, it's nearly 80% of the sun's energy is being used per square metre. So that's a big plus. Now, this has got a very small power system on it, because really there's only about 800 watts of panels here, but they have a small battery system as well. So let's go and check it out. So this is the little power system from RedEarth, and inside here are some batteries. So we've got 3 Gen Z batteries. They're, I think, 3 kilowatt hours each, so it's 9 kilowatt hours of storage. There's a Sungrow 5 kilowatt hybrid inverter. There's a Morningstar Genstar MPPT, which is pretty cool. So it's DC coupled to the batteries. And one of the reasons for putting the Genstar in there is that the voltage of the array is quite low. There's only 4 panels. And so we're really only up to about 120 volts, which is more or less the start voltage for many hybrid inverters. So even though the Sungrow inverter is capable of using solar to charge these batteries, there's just not enough volts on the solar panels, whereas the MPPT is very happy to be charging from solar at 120 volts and charging a 52 volt battery pack. Yeah, that's pretty cool. There's also some monitoring in here, and you can just get an app and check how it's going. This whole thing is weatherproof. So it's out here on the south side. Now, I should point out, just about no battery likes being in the sun, so putting it on the south side of the building is always a good idea. Now the owner's a little bit concerned that there's a bit of unpainted wall there because we actually took away an old system and she hasn't painted it yet, but don't worry, we'll Photoshop that in, right? Anyway, let's keep moving. Well, that's the end of the tour of the houses, but I thought I'd finish properly on my studio, which is also a testing area. So this is where a lot of the content for the Smart Energy Lab gets filmed, is in my studio here in the heart of Wombat Hollow. Now this is just an old carpentry shed, nothing very flash. It's amazing what you can do with a little bit of set dressing and some nice lighting. It's pretty cold in here in wintertime, so we do have a wood fire, but we've also got air conditioning recently, so we've got a reverse cycle aircon in here, just so I can warm it up pretty quickly. So in terms of systems that we've tested in here, there's been so many. A very quick view around the room. We've got a GoodWe SBP, that's a 5 kilowatt AC coupled inverter with the Sigenergy AERL batteries. Those are lithium titanate batteries, pretty interesting design. Some people call them Toblerones. We've got a Varta system here. Now Varta, I don't think is available in Australia anymore, but very popular in Germany where they're from. And this is a self-use system, meaning that it doesn't do backup, it just captures surplus solar and stores it as energy in a 6.5 kilowatt hour battery. Now it has no solar inputs at all. It basically uses a CT upstream to measure any surplus from other solar generators. So it's an AC coupled battery, not a solar inverter. There you go. We've got a solar system here with a LG Chem 6.5 battery. That's the Solax 5 kilowatt hybrid. And we've got some of the older Sungrow here, Sungrow 5 kilowatt hybrid. The newer one's much nicer, well looking, you know, but this one's perfectly okay. Really nice interface too with the app. And it has the backup box, and it's connected to yet another LG Chem battery. All of the LG Chem batteries, by the way, have either been replaced under warranty because of the recall or had their firmware upgraded to make them safe and compliant. Now the new kid on the block here is this system here. It's a Sigen store system from a company called Sigenergy. Now you probably haven't heard of Sigenergy because they're really quite new, but they're not new in many ways. Most of the staff come from a very well-known, in fact, one of the major inverter manufacturers in the world, and they started their own company. So they went from woe to go and built this amazing system in just 18 months. And it's one of many. So this is a hybrid inverter that's a 5 kilowatt hybrid inverter on the top, but they actually come in single phase and 3-phase up to 25 kilowatts in the same form factor. Amazing. The batteries themselves are 8 kilowatt hour units. I've got 2 of them. So that gives me 16 kilowatt hours, and they go all the way up to 48 kilowatt hours in the full stack. So full stack, 48 kilowatt hours, very slim. Now, the thing that really got me excited when I first saw them at a show this year was that they also come with a, wait for it, 25 kilowatt DC EV charger, which it looks just like one of the batteries, but it's got a cable coming off the side. So you can charge with DC directly into your EV, and it's bi-directional. Now, what on earth does that mean? Well, it's capable of using your car as a battery as well. I think there's going to be a few regulatory hurdles with that one, but once we've solved those, it's going to be very exciting. So to have bi-directional charging directly off your Sigen store system. And the box up the top here is not an inverter. The inverter, remember, it's a hybrid, so the solar comes in here. This is the gateway, and a gateway is basically a bunch of protection equipment, switches, contactors, and a little computer, an onboard computer that measures, monitors, and controls all of the loads in the system. So this is it's a bit of a prototype. This one, the single phase unit, you might, if anyone can see it closely enough, they've actually got double poled switching, which is not compliant in Australia, so they're changing that to be single poled switching. So like I say, I often get early release equipment, which I do some assessments on. So what's cool about this, by the way, is it can take multiple sources. So you can have solar inverters, 1, 2, 3, and they can be a mixture of Sigen stores or generic solar inverters. It can take, it's got a backup circuit, it's got a grid port, and it's got a smart port. Now, what on earth is a smart port? Well, I've been told it can be many things, but the most common use for it is as a generator input. That means you can have an auto start generator. The auto start functionality is built into the little computer on board. And so grid fails, you're running on solar and battery. Battery gets low, it's nighttime, there's no solar, it auto starts the generator, keeps the power on, the sun comes up the next day, so you're running back on solar and battery. So it's pretty cool. Multiple energy sources. Now, these can be scaled tremendously. I believe they've done a 3 megawatt hour system. Now, that's a lot. Basically, just using the three-phase inverters, having stacks and stacks and stacks of these batteries, all AC coupled together, acting as one big system. So they can be aggregated into larger systems. So effectively you can go from the smallest system you would want, possibly 5 kilowatt hour battery as an option, up to 3 megawatt hours of storage using the same products. Pretty cool, eh? Anyway, that's... Oh yeah, there's one more room. In fact, I better turn the light on because it's a bit dark in there. And if you're wondering what all the exercise equipment is, that's for my kids. They like to do a bit of gym. So this is kind of a mixed use room. And so here we have the oldest area. Now this room here, we call it T1 because it was training room number 1, where I first started in 2015 running courses on designing and installing solar and battery systems. It's a bit of a junk room, partly. It's also my storeroom. Behind me is just some stock for equipment. But this behind me here is a combination of AC and DC coupling. So we've got a DC maximum power point tracking charge controller that's charging some lithium-ion batteries from Simplify. We've got a Fronius snap inverter. This is the older Galvo model, no longer available. And the Galvo is AC coupled to the Victron Quattro. So this is a Victron Quattro, the 5 kilowatt unit. Quattros go up to I think 15 kilowatts, and you can have multiples per phase, so you can do quite big systems with Victron as well, but this is just the 5 kilowatt unit. So why would you want DC and AC coupled systems? For reliability. Now, one of the challenges with a pure AC coupled system, that means this solar inverter only works, it only generates when the battery inverter, the Victron Quattro, is on, because it's a grid forming system basically in a typical standalone power system. If these batteries are over discharged, say at night time in winter, and this battery inverter turns off and the sun comes up, nothing's going to happen because there is no grid for this to synchronize with. So this needs a voltage reference to synchronize with, and because the inverter's off, nothing's going to happen. So you're basically stuck. You've got some, but you've got flat batteries. That's where DC coupling comes to the rescue. DC coupling, this is the Victron MPPT. They make a huge range of MPPTs, by the way, up to their RS450s, which are very powerful and can take 200 amps worth of charge, or can supply 200 amps worth of charge to a battery system. So this will charge the batteries independently of any AC system. You don't need the Quattro to be on. This will charge these Simplify batteries. And once those batteries reach the switch on voltage for the Quattro will turn back on again. And Bob's your uncle, as they say in Australia. You now have an AC grid to which your AC coupled solar inverter can synchronize with. It's magic. So in summary, having some DC coupled solar is a really good idea for a standalone system for reliability. Now, we have been talking about microgrid. Every system you see here is actually connected to the microgrid. So what would normally be the generator input for a Quattro is actually my microgrid. On this side, we've got the Hive. This is actually made by Alpha ESS. It's kind of like a junior hybrid system, AC coupled. There's no solar input. You basically have I think it's about a 2.6 kilowatt hour battery in the base here, and a 5 kilowatt inverter that can charge and discharge this battery. You can actually get extra battery modules to make it more useful, but it's kind of like your starter kit, if you were, for batteries. And we actually use it as a dedicated UPS for the data center up here. Don't know if you can see it. So it's actually keeping the data center alive. So that little 2.6 kilowatt hour battery is actually really quite useful. So there you go. There's a few of the systems from yesteryear and some of the newer ones. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I do have one last thing to show you, but it's not about batteries, okay, or solar. Well, thanks for coming on the tour with me. It's been quite a long one, and I hope you've enjoyed seeing all the different systems here on the microgrid at the Smart Energy Lab on the Murumuru Cooperative. Now, the last thing I thought I'd just show you is where the magic happens. This is my little studio. As I mentioned before, the building's actually just an old carpentry shed that a neighbour of mine built, which they've since moved on, and I've turned it into my little YouTube studio. So this is not really a studio tour, and I've just got the house lights on, so it's kind of looked pretty boring. But basically, it is real equipment at the back here. A lot of stuff which I use every day is on the shelves behind me. So some people think it's like a fake backdrop. And I do have quite a sophisticated camera set up for a little home YouTube studio. I've got a couple of Blackmagic cameras under those black covers there, and studio lights, and good audio. Good audio is really important, and so got the Australian-made Rode NTG 5 boom mic, and a Sound Designs 32-bit float recorder down here, so really good quality sound. Anyway, that's it. So the purpose of making this whole tour was to take you along to show you what a real microgrid looks like, what some of the houses and some of the systems on those houses are like, and I hope you've enjoyed it. Anyway, thanks for watching. Check ya.